right, welcome everyone to Midwest Invasive Plant Network September webinar. We're going to be talking about biocontrol options for Tree of Heaven. And we have a guest presenter with us today, Harrison Miles from Virginia Tech. And I will be giving Harrison a proper introduction in just a moment. But if you're not familiar with the Midwest Invasive Plant Network, or MIPIN, we've been around since about 2006. We cover a 10-state province area, and our mission is to reduce the impacts of invasive plants in the Midwest. We want to thank our sponsors who support this work that we do. And I want to give a special shout out today to the Invasive Species Center of Ontario and tell you a little bit about them as they are our webinar sponsor for today. So the Invasive Species Center, they are a not-for-profit organization. They mobilize against invasive species that harm the environment, economy, and society. They are a hub for collaboration and knowledge sharing and a respected partner and leader in invasive species science, education, and action. And I think it's also worth noting, especially given the topic for today, that in 2024, the Ontario government regulated 10 species under the Ontario Invasive Species Act, and one of those was Tree of Heaven. So that is now a prohibitive species in the province. And so the Invasive Species Center has compiled a great deal of information on Tree of Heaven, and so I've put that specific link at the bottom of this slide in case you want to use that as another resource to learn more about this plant. And if there's any other plants that you're dying to learn more about, I would love to have you visit mipin.org, our website. We maintain an invasive plant list. We have a controlled database for management information. And we have a lot of different directories and resources to help you manage invasive species locally as well. So that and much more at mipin.org. If you want to stay connected to us, and we hope you do, we have a quarterly newsletter. We have one going out next week. So if you'd like to start receiving those, you can go to our homepage and sign up for that. You can also sign up for our email listserv. And pretty new, we have a events page and calendar now. So not only do we hope that that will make it easier for you to find MIPIN events, but you can also find other webinars and conferences being offered across the Midwest. You can also find us on social media, or you can simply send an email, mipin@mortonarb.org, and I'll be sure to put that in the chat. All right, finally, again, just thank you for being here today. We hope that you'll continue to join us for future webinars. And if you'd like to help make sure that we're able to continue offering these, we not only rely on sponsors, but also individuals. So if you're able to support us in any way today, we really appreciate that. I'll put a link for that in the chat, or if you're really quick, you can use the QR code. All right. And yeah, and if you do need to contact us, I'm Michelle Blasker. I'm the director for the organization. So if you use this email, that's who you'll be reaching. Okay, I am going to stop sharing my screen and invite Harrison to share his slides. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about Harrison Miles. He is a PhD student in the Department of Forest Resources and Environmental Conservation at Virginia Tech. His dissertation utilizes molecular and field methods to examine interactions between the invasive tree of heaven, its biological control Verticillium non-alfalfae, and spotted lanternfly. He's also an affiliate of the Invasive Species Collaborative, a group of over 70 researchers at Virginia Tech that specialize in invasive species. So very excited for this topic today. Harrison, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Michelle. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me today. Going to talk about potential biological control options for Tree of Heaven. We'll talk a little bit about Tree of Heaven's biology and its best friend, spotted lanternfly. I think these are inseparable narratives at this point. But first, a little bit more about me. I'm a PhD student in forestry. In my second year, I have a master's in elementary education and a bachelor's in psychology and a circuitous route to the life sciences, but I'm enjoying it. I'm advised by Dr. Carrie Fear at Virginia Tech, and her lab focuses on forest health. My specific study system is Tree of Heaven, Verticillium non-alfalfae, which we'll talk about, and then interactions with spotted lanternfly. And like Michelle said, I'm an affiliate of the Invasive Species Collaborative, which is a great group producing good work on invasive species. So like I said, you cannot talk about Tree of Heaven today in the US without also talking about spotted lanternfly. So we will talk about both. First, I'm sure many of you are aware Tree of Heaven's one of our most prolific and invasive tree species in the U.S. It's the fastest growing tree in North America, can reach 6 feet in a single growing season, can produce over 300,000 seeds as a mature adult. And it has a great invasive story. It was brought here in the 1780s by a colonist from Europe. Uh, and he planted it at his estate in Pennsylvania. There were some subsequent introductions on the East Coast, and then in the late 1800s, Chinese immigrants came to Northern California and brought it for its cultural importance. It has some traditional medicinal uses, but also can be used for silk production. And if anybody has hands-on management experience with Tree of Heaven, you're very aware of its ability to sprout from cut roots and its aggressive regrowing. So I never recommend mechanical control alone for managing Tree of Heaven. You can see in this series of pictures here a clear-cut area with Tree of Heaven in it. A couple months later, from March to June, you can see plenty of growth, and then by August, you have that dense monoculture that if you're anywhere on the highways of the East Coast, you see this pretty constantly on medians and on the sides of the highways and railroads. And then this graphic here is from an excellent paper about the biology of Tree of Heaven. It shows, it can sprout from its roots up to 27 meters away from the parent tree. And it actually does all of these root and stump sproutings as a response to that mechanical stress of cutting. And then I also like to say, don't mulch it. The literature on this is a little bit mixed, but it can resprout and grow from cut pieces if there's intact meristem. So be careful there. And then on top of all that, it's also allelopathic. A Tree of Heaven produces an allele chemical called allanthone, which it produces systemically, but is highest in its roots. And once it's in the soil, is associated with reduced germination and growth of competitive plant species. So it's a real headache, Tree of Heaven. And then we, of course, have spotted lanternfly. So like I said, Tree of Heaven's been here for 200 years, and it's really facilitating the invasion of spotted lanternfly, which arrived in Pennsylvania in 2011 to 2014. Spotted lanternfly has four instars, nymphal instars. The early nymphs emerged in about May. There are three of those black and white little nymphs, each one progressively larger. And then they pick up their red color and their pre-wings, and the adults emerge about September. There's some geographic variation here in when the timing of their development. The farther south populations are. In Virginia, I saw a lot of adults in August. So the ones that are further south than Pennsylvania, where this was initially done in the US, they're growing faster and they're growing larger. So they evolve together, spotted lanternfly and Tree of Heaven, which is what makes them such an interesting system to work on. Not too many invasive stories have this facilitation, this coevolution in their native range, and then they've found each other on the other side of the planet. So as lanternfly develops, it grows in its preference for Tree of Heaven. The early nymphs, and at all stages, are capable of feeding on over 70 species in the United States. But as they grow from nymphs to adults, they prefer and end up feeding almost exclusively on Tree of Heaven. They are able, though, to develop without access to Tree of Heaven. So a really resilient bug. And part of the problem, probably the major issue that we're running into in the United States, is that they prefer, or they like to feed on grape species. And they are a serious threat to the vineyard industry for grape production for food, juice, wine, plant byproducts. They don't feed directly on the grapes, they're feeding on the vine. So they're stealing sugars that reduce yield and can kill the grapevines. It takes 5 to 6 years to get a grapevine to be productive, so that's time and money lost. And also triples that management cost for the insect, and that's tripling the cost of insecticide use, hands-on management. Unless you want spotted lanternfly in your wine, somebody's going to have to be picking them out almost entirely by hand, I think, which is pretty labor intensive. And so that brings me back to biological control options. So this is a picture I took. So my grant, the grant that I'm funded by, not my grant necessarily, but it's dealing with management of Tree of Heaven in the vicinity of vineyards. to reduce the load of spotted lanternfly that are dispersing into the vineyards. So this is pretty common sight on a forest edge or any kind of disturbed edge to have very dense stands of tree of heaven. This one was full of spotted lanternfly, and you can see how close it is to the vines of the vineyard. Very easy for them to hop and fly back and forth and have access to both of these things. Spotted lanternfly will develop larger and reproduce more if it has access to both tree of heaven and grape. So it's a real issue that we're looking into. So let's talk about biological control. First, I'm not sure what everybody's background is. I see some managers are here, but what is biological control? You'll also hear me call it biocontrol. I use those pretty interchangeably. But biological control is using a living organism to suppress the population of another living organism. Some advantages of biological control over the conventional controls of chemical herbicides and insecticides and mechanical control, cutting or manual removal of things, is that once we put an organism into the environment, it exists there. It can disperse without us. It can reproduce and come back every year. So these are major reasons that we use biological control. There are three kinds of biological control, or three categories. The first, which I won't talk about too much, is conservation biocontrol. And this is creating suitable habitat for natural enemies in the vicinity of where you're trying to treat a pest. An example of this would be if you have aphids on your tomatoes, you want to control them with a biocontrol agent like a ladybug. If you're planting flowers near your tomatoes that are suitable habitat for the ladybug, that would be implementing conservation biocontrol. But I'm going to focus on the other two. The first of which is classical biological control, which is the import of non-native natural enemies to control pests. And a classical biocontrol example is Cactoblastis cactorum, which is a cactus-eating moth in the caterpillar stage, can really devastate cactus. And they were deployed to Australia and South Africa, neither of which have native cacti, and pretty successfully controlled. I know prickly pear was one of the species down there that was a problem, but that's a great example of successful classical biological control. And then the third example is augmentative biological control. And this is the inflation of existing populations, typically native populations, of natural enemies to control pests. Most examples of augmentative biological control are microbial. So this is a picture of Bavaria bassiana, which is a generalist insect pathogen. It's fairly cosmopolitan. We definitely consider it native in the US. Here it is infecting a spotted lanternfly. But Bavaria is available commercially. You can buy it online. You can use it at home. And that's an example of augmentative because Bavaria is out there present in the soil, in insect populations. And what you're doing is you're increasing it artificially or with human involvement, inflating that population. So we are going to focus today on some examples of classical and augmentative biological controls for tree of heaven. But before we talk about species, I want to talk a little bit about why biocontrol is important in invasion biology. Biocontrol is used commonly in agricultural settings, but specifically, I think it plays a special role in invasive species management. And this has to do with one of the major reasons that invasive species have an advantage over native species. So in invasion biology, we have plenty of explanations for why invasives do so well. And one of them is the enemy release hypothesis. And this suggests that invasive species have an advantage over native species because they're released from the stress of the natural enemies of their evolved native range. So I have an example here to discuss. I'm not an expert on oak, so I just Googled oak natural enemies. And I found many long lists. You have caterpillars that eat the foliage, scales, fungal infections, bacterial infections, lace bugs, aphids, wood-boring beetles, cicadas, gall wasps, mite wasps. Oaks in the US have hundreds of natural enemies. And no matter what the density of this infestation is, it might be minor, But every time an oak runs into one of these natural enemies, it has to spend resources in defense. And every resource it spends in defense is one that it can't spend on reproduction and growth. And this is where we see the difference and the advantage that invasives have over native plants or native species. If you Google Tree of Heaven natural enemies in the US, you aren't going to find a comprehensive list, in part because no one's compiled one, but there's also not that many. I've listed 5 here, and these happen to be the 5 that I'm going to talk about as potential biological controls. There are probably more out there. I'm not including them on the list because one, I'm trying to illustrate a point, but there aren't too many in general. Um, and as far as consideration for use as biological control, um, they have to be host specific. So there are probably some generalist fungi that infect tree of heaven, or some generalist insects that may feed on foliage. But if they aren't specific to tree of heaven, we don't consider them potential candidates for biological control. So what I see is the benefit of biocontrol in invasive species management is trying to narrow this gap in enemy release to level the playing field between the invasives and the native. All right, so now let's talk about some species, the reason you are here. So I've ordered these in order of how much we know about them, uh, from the least known to the best known. So the one that we know the least about is Agrilis smeridifrons, the East Asian metallic wood-boring beetle. Now you might look at this and say that looks a lot like emerald ash borer, and it does, and they are very closely related. They are congeners. They're from the same genus. They are both found in the same area of the US. So since 2011, this beetle has been found in the US in Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey. The adults lay their eggs on cracks in the bark, and larvae feed under the bark, and then they emerge again through that classic breasted D-shaped hole out as adults. Here's a picture these pictures are from Hobeck et al. 2017. These are in China, so you can see a tree here where the death is associated with Gryllus. You can see a larva here. They feed under the bark on the phloem tissue and create feeding galleries. And they can be pretty damaging if you have a large enough infestation. Um, so there are some obstacles, I think, to this species and its use as a biocontrol in the US. Number one being there's not a lot of research about it done here in the US. The first thing we need to do is confirm host specificity. In observations from its native range suggest that yes, this species is specific to feeding on tree of heaven. But we need to confirm that the genotype that's here in the US is also specific to tree of heaven, and that there aren't plants here in the US that aren't present in Asia that it might feed on. And then the second obstacle I see for this species is a social one. We've spent a lot of time and energy and resources telling people all about emerald ash borer, and here you have a nearly identical insect. And so if you're telling people that this shiny green bug is bad and this shiny green bug is good, I think you might run into some conflict or at least headaches in management. Our next species is a mite. Species is Aculops atlanthi. The Atlantis mite, or you might see it called the Atlantis leaf curl mite. So far, it's been found in the US, in Virginia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Maryland. But it's also been found in Italy, I think a couple other countries in Europe, and Canada. It attacks primarily the young tree of heaven leaves. So that's not just the young tree, but the young, newest developed leaves. So in this picture down here, this is one I took in our greenhouse. You can see the terminal leaflet has already been attacked, and then some of the other leaves as well. This is known primarily to researchers of Tree of Heaven as a greenhouse pest. And if you are interested, you can use predatory mites in your greenhouse to control it. But it is also found in natural settings, so it is a candidate for biological control. Here are some great scanning electron micrographs of adults developing nymphs and then eggs. And then this picture here, a little zoomed out, I counted in here, there's over 50 of the adults and juveniles and then hundreds of eggs. So these can be pretty heavy infestations. And they feed directly on the leaves. And symptoms are yellow stippling, the leaves curl upwards, which is fairly distinctive. And then you can get these necrotic lesions. And then something that you'll see too, I don't know how well it transfers over Zoom, but there's little white specks all over the leaf. And that's just a telltale sign. Those are the exoskeletons of the mites as they molt. So a couple barriers for this species to be used as a biological control. The first one being it's understudied. We're just finding it, and we've kind of found it in this band along the East Coast into the Midwest. It's likely farther spread than that, but they're difficult to identify. They are microscopic. You can identify them with intensive microscopy work, but other than that, it takes molecular work to do. And then internationally, so us and our folks in Canada and Italy, who I met earlier this year, we're all calling it different things. So in the US, we're calling it Actylops. In Canada and Italy, they're using another genus. So we have this species complex issue, which as we move towards research, especially towards host specificity, we really need to be sure that we're talking about the same species. So that's the first thing that needs to be resolved. The second is just we need to know more about its biology. We don't know how well it survives out in the environment. It does very well in greenhouses, but is it doing well in canopies? We don't know how it overwinters or where it overwinters on the plant. Is it in the buds? Is it in soil? Is it somewhere on the stem? We don't know. So these are questions that need to be answered. And then we also need to know, is it worth the investment? Certainly, they can damage these young plants, but are they going to have a useful effect on canopy-sized trees? We don't know. All right. So our third species is Atava aurea, the Ailanthus webworm moth. Now, this is a native species. It's native to Central America, and then it came up to North America about the same time that tree of heaven arrived in North America. And it is a specialist on Cimarubaceae. Now, that's the family that tree of heaven belongs to. And there are two other Cimarubaceae species in the US. Question number one that I keep bringing up is it specific enough to tree of heaven? Somebody's going to have to do the research to see if those are ecologically and economically important enough, and if the damaging effects of this moth on those trees would outweigh the benefits that we would get from deploying it against tree of heaven. But the great things about this, as used for biological control, it can produce up to 4 generations per year, and it is present throughout tree of heaven's growing season. It's damaging tree of heaven from spring to fall. Here's some pictures I took in the field. So here's some caterpillars. They feed directly on the leaves, and then they stitch the leaves together. And they create these, I don't know if you'd call it a nest, but it certainly looks like one. And when they stitch the leaves together, they compress them and continually compress them, and they actually they break the rachis, which takes some strength to do as an insect. It's fairly impressive. But then in one of these, you probably have a couple dozen. And then this is probably a 6-foot lanthus sapling, and they will completely defoliate trees of that size. I see them all the time. I can't remember a stand of tree of heaven I've been in that didn't have evidence of webworm. And you'll see it totally defoliating these smaller ones. Not a ton that I can see in the canopy, just with the naked eye, but you will see the odd branch up above stitched together like this and dead. And then here you have the adult moth. It's about 2 centimeters long. Um, they are polyphagous and how they feed. A barrier to use as biocontrol, an unanswered question. There's one paper out there that suggested they might be pollinators of tree of heaven. And I don't think that's a deal breaker necessarily as a biological control, but it certainly detracts from their ability to be used as biocontrol if they're out there propagating tree of heaven. A lot of questions flying in. All right. So now we'll talk about Eucryptorhynchus branti. Of the five species, this is the second to last one and the second closest to actual use in the United States. This one, unlike the previous three, has been studied actively as a biological control for tree of heaven. The common name submitted to the Entomology Society of America is the Ailanthus trunk weevil. We know it as a serious pest of tree of heaven in China. Tree of heaven is a desired tree. It's used as a street tree. It's used in landscaping and erosion control in China. So there's plenty of research coming out of that country with how to control E. branti. Um, but here we'd like to use it to kill tree of heaven. Location, location, location. So eBranti was brought to the US in 2005 and has been kept in quarantine here at Virginia Tech for 20 years. I think they've had three total trips to supplement their colony. The adults feed on tree of heaven foliage, and they lay their eggs in the bark, and the larvae feed under the bark in galleries. Then they'll complete their development and emerge as adult weevils. Um, their damage looks like this. I'm not sure if these are emergence or oviposition holes, but you can see how many can infect a single tree. And then their galleries, they're feeding on the phloem, and they can effectively girdle a heavily infected tree with how much they eat. And what's very cool about them is a laboratory study here at Virginia Tech found they were capable of vectoring verticillium. Now that's the fungus we're going to talk about next, but it is also a natural enemy of tree of heaven. So if we have a biocontrol that could be vectoring another biocontrol for us, that would be a really powerful tool for managing tree of heaven. And like I said, this species is the second closest to actual release, and it is currently under review by USD APHIS for permitted experimental release. So far, it's been kept entirely in quarantine, but these would be the first large-scale field trials, which our fingers are crossed that they begin next year. So stay tuned. All right. So now our final species that we're going to talk about today, the one that is the best studied, the one that we know most about. It's also the one I know most about because this is my study system. It's Verticillium non-alfalfae. Verticillium is a genus made entirely of plant pathogens. Depending on the source you're looking at 10 to 13 species in the genus. Um, some verticillium species are problems in crop systems. Verticillium dahliae, which some strains of can infect and cause disease in tree of heaven, are problems in cotton and olive in the US. So there's that little bit of obstacle getting people to recognize verticillium as a potentially positive thing. But verticillium non-alfalfae is found all over the world, wherever tree of heaven's been found in China, Europe, and the US. In the US, it's been found naturally in Virginia, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. And currently it's limited to those three for research by the EPA. The earliest reports came out of Virginia in the 1930s. People found some stand-level death from vascular wilt, but it re-entered the zeitgeist in 2003 when it was found killing thousands of trees in Pennsylvania, and it's been studied as a biological control ever since. We're working with one specific strain that has been found to be highly specific to tree of heaven. So it's been tried in many different host plants in the US, and found to only cause disease in tree of heaven. And then it's highly virulent. It's very effective at killing tree of heaven. Um, we do inoculation after leaf out in the spring. So that's typically May in Virginia. And what we do is this is a woodworking tool. You hammer it in with a rubber mallet, and then you drop in a liquid solution of spores, and the xylem will take it right up like a straw. You can actually see the liquid just disappear, and you can sometimes hear it bubbling up into the tree. Right now, for application rate, we're looking at 25 milliliters per 10th acre. It's about 400 square feet. In my experience, that's pretty much treating every tree in a 10th acre, going up to each tree and doing this gouge method. Hack and squirt, we think will also work. That's something I'm going to be looking at. And some people have tried it for a more convenient application method. We do trees over 7-inch DBH. So our larger class of tree of heaven trees, they get 3 milliliters equidistant in 3 spots around the tree. And then anything smaller than that is getting 1 milliliter in one gouge. And we can see symptoms in as little as 4 weeks. Symptoms progress from chlorosis, which is yellowing of leaves, to wilt, which you see down here. And then if you take away the bark, there's vascular staining. So the way that the disease actually works in the tree and kills the tree is the tree responds in an attempt to compartmentalize the infection by forming tyloses in its xylem. And this blocks the movement of water and nutrients. And the tree effectively kills itself with its response to the infection. So after all of that takes place, we see defoliation, which you can see here. You can see the kind of canopy release we get from infected trees. Um, and then epicormic sprouting is also a common stress response in general, but we do see that with verticillium as well. And then we can see death in as little as 4 months. Sometimes it takes multiple years of that initial infection for a tree to succumb. So we might see defoliation like this in September, but then we see it'll leaf out again in May, but then the infection's still present and the tree fights it for another year. And then if you're curious, this is what it looks like in the lab. To date, most of the research has been done on lab cultured inoculum like that. But we are working on with companies to develop a commercially viable powder product that managers could carry with them out into the field, or homeowners could have. That is a convenient water soluble inoculum. So something that's really cool about verticillium that makes it a better tool, I think, than chemical herbicides, which certainly do work on tree of heaven, is its ability to spread through roots. Verticillium naturally is a soil-borne fungus, and it infects the trees through the roots, so it can survive both in roots and in soil. Um, but we know that from studies that tree of heaven forms really interconnected root systems. They can form functional root grafts. So in this little tiny picture here, you can see two roots from different trees that have effectively joined together. They're sharing fluid inside. And then tree of heaven with all of those root sprouts, like I talked about at the beginning, some stands can be entirely clonal. But we talk about them as being pretty connected, whether they're not genetically identical. Any stand of tree of heaven is fairly connected to each other. And then this study by O'Neill and Davis was a proof of concept of this. They cut a stem here, injected it with dye, and then over time you could see once the bark was removed that dye had been translocated between stems. And we see this with verticillium as well. So Tim Shively just finished his dissertation on the same system. This little area here, he inoculated in 2023. And then in 2024, we see spread this way. And then same thing over here, he inoculated trees on this side of this path. And then the following summer, they did spread to this side of the path. So that's the kind of the big selling point for verticillium as a biocontrol is this ability to spread and persist in the environment after you've introduced it there. All right. And then my final slide is about spotted lanternfly, just an honorable mention. It is not considered a biological control agent or a potential one because of all of its negative aspects, but it is capable of killing tree of heaven as well. So encourage them, I guess, if you can, in that respect. But that's all I have. I'd be happy to take questions for the remainder of the time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Harrison. And I think as you commented, we do have questions coming in. So maybe we can look at some of these together. Going back, there was a question about whether there's a range map for the, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna say it right, Aculope in North America.
Yes, so I don't have a map, but it's only been confirmed in Virginia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Maryland. I think I may have seen it in Tennessee, but that's anecdotal. Yeah,
Okay,
no
so
map.
there isn't, as far as you're aware, there's not a map that someone's put together for
Not
that
that I'm aware
that
of. No.
range yet. Okay. Then there were some other questions about native, I think kind of the crossover between Tree of Heaven and some of these biocontrols and native species. So we have a question here. We don't have Tree of Heaven, but we do have sumac. I found many instars, adults, eggs. I think this is of the webworm on sumac. Should we also be looking at sumac enemies?
That's interesting. So the webworm found on sumac.
That's how I'm interpreting that. Sally, if I'm misinterpreting that, please feel free to add an additional comment.
I know lanternfly will feed on sumac.
Let's see here.
Yeah,
Oh,
lanternfly.
oh, okay. So we were talking about Lanchfly. That makes more sense. Okay.
Yeah, so lanternfly will definitely, it feeds on over 70 species in the US, over 100 species around the world, and it will lay its eggs on anything, anything that's fairly smooth. So sumac, you'll definitely find eggs on it. The one of the top preferred is black walnut too. So yeah, you can try to control your sumac as a means of controlling lanternfly. You can, the eggs are very fragile. I mean, you can go scrape them with your keys or just a rock on the ground. Yeah.
Okay. A couple of comments here that maybe the webworm has been seen in Indiana, and some other locations.
Yeah, I think the webworm's pretty well spread. I don't have a map for that one, but it's all over.
Okay. And then we'll talk about the wilt in a minute. But there is a question here from Joseph. What are the native trees in the Simurabaceae? I think that's the family, I
Yes.
think, right?
I knew somebody was going to ask this. So one of them is corkwood, and that's in Florida, like Gulf Coast area. That's Lightnaria floridana. And then there's Simurbaca glauca, definitely butchering that. But that one is more in the Midwest. I'm forgetting its common name. Well, I'll look that up for you.
And then question about, so for the wilt, are there specific environmental conditions such as sufficient rainfall or heat that influence disease development?
Terrific question. So Tim Shively, the student that preceded me on this, his major finding was that there's temperature is going to be the limitation on the verticillium's range. It requires colder temperatures that we find in um, mountains and elevation and in more northern climes. So temperature is definitely a limitation. That brings up a good point that I didn't mention. None of these biological controls are going to be the silver bullet for Tree of Heaven. Its range is wider than each of these biological controls range individually. There is overlap between them. Um, but yes, there are range limitations to verticillium specifically having to do with heat. The colder, the better. With rainfall, we don't have specific data on sufficient amount of rainfall. We do think that the more rainfall would be better for a fungal environment. Um, it's interesting because in Virginia and all my field sites this year, we have a lot more rain than typical, and we're seeing variable effects. So we'll see how that data shake out.
Okay, and we have one more question, but we have a little time, so if anyone has one they haven't put in the chat yet, please feel free. Do you envision it would be self-spreading or require human intervention?
Yes. So that is one limitation of verticillium. I talked about that root and soil spread, but it doesn't have an obvious means of dispersal on its own. It does not sporulate on the leaf surface. It doesn't. We don't think wind is a big dispersal mechanism for it. So yes, humans can certainly go around spreading it, and that's our main goal. But we're also looking at potential insect vectors. So once Eucalyptorhynchus branti is out there in the environment, that's the trunk weevil. Um, we think that it will be able to vector between those distant populations and solve that problem. And then I also have experiments looking at lanternfly. So hopefully lanternfly can vector between them. But then there might also be other bugs. that are capable of doing that. And then there's some evidence that it might spread in leaf litter, but that's fairly local dispersal.
And then could soil inoculation be a potential delivery means?
Yes. So somebody has looked at that. Yes, you can inoculate soil with a dumping a bucket of inoculum on the ground at the base of a tree. The obstacle there is inoculum prep. Um, with lab culture, it takes a ton of culture to produce that much. Uh, I mean, we're talking about liters of inoculum for soil inoculation, whereas we're talking about milliliters of inoculum for injection. That might change with the ability to produce it commercially in a powdered formulation. But I think direct stem injections are going to be the way that this goes. Probably hack and squirt is going to be the most convenient.
Yeah, I was wondering about that, about the labor intensity of doing this kind of work. And then could you just talk a little bit about the timing of when you've been doing this inoculation work?
Yes, so verticillium, the all the studies on it have been injection shortly after leaf out, so late spring, May time. Anything earlier than that, we haven't seen the infection take off. And yeah, so May, um, that's what we're thinking.
Okay, and we have another question here. In Michigan, we've had considerable success with classical biocontrol of purple lurstриfe. It took years to validate the biocontrol insect and then propagate it. Will verticillium be any faster?
Um, well, faster in the sense that we are 20 years into it. So I think we're already close. That is a limitation of biological control in general. You know, we don't want any of these to be released into the environment and then become the problem. So it takes 20 years of validation. So I can't say that verticillium is faster since it's taken so long, but we are close to the end of that validation stage, getting to general release. I think that answers the question.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
Okay,
Verticillium does grow fast. It grows quickly. You can grow it in weeks. Yeah.
wonderful. Well, I appreciate all these questions. Again, thank you, Harrison, for your time today. Um, I encourage if you haven't looked at the chat, Harrison's email is in there. I also put a link in. He wrote a blog for the Woody Invasives of the Great Lakes Collaborative, so there's a link to that. There's a link to some MIPIN resources and the donation link if you'd like to support this webinar. So with that, I just again thank you everyone for being here. And please reach out to Harrison or myself if you have any questions post webinar. All right. Yeah, thanks everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you all.